So we're gonna really talk today about, or our speaker is going to talk today about really thinking different, thinking outside of the box, being different, standing up even when you're standing alone. And I challenged him, and I think you guys will be very pleased with what he comes with. This is Shawn Brown. Can we say hello? I'm going to read, and I'm also going to make comments from his bio. Shawn, you want me to say your name? Okay, I have to say his middle name. Shawn Frederico Brown was born in Brownsville, Brooklyn. No? Okay, no, just one or two people. On November 9th, 1978. Really? Shawn was born in Brookdale Hospital to Panamanian parents. His mother raised him along with an older brother and a younger brother. He first attended PS 41, then JHS 275, and Graphic Arts High School in Manhattan. He first attended college at New York City College of Technology, then Brooklyn College, where he received a BA in Psychology, a Master's in General and Special Education, another Master's in Educational Leadership, and is currently taking courses, and I'm proud to say, soon called Dr. Brown, to complete his PhD in Urban Education in 2022. For the last 12 years, he has held titles in the New York City Department of Education as a teacher, assistant principal, and now serves as a principal at EBC High School for Public Service. The accomplishment that gives him the most pride, however, is being happily married for 15 years and his 3 children, one of which I am the godfather for. Shawn is not only a mentor to me, as I mentioned to you guys before, but a great friend, an older brother, and someone that I turn to for great wisdom. We all need mentors, yes? Yeah. Right? Mentors, what do I always say? A good mentor is who? Someone who's mentored. Beautiful. So I'm going to turn it over, and I want us to give a thunderous round of applause and standing ovation for Shawn Frederico Brown.
Thanks, we didn't have to start off. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to your principal and Jeffrey Moss. Jeffrey's like a little brother to me. I know that you guys see him as this, mature person. I don't really see him that way. He's just like a young guy, and I love him a lot. I'm so proud of the work that he's doing. And I'm really happy to be speaking to you guys today. I love working with teenagers. You guys make sense. Adults don't make any sense whatsoever. Nothing you do makes sense. When we try and speak with the rapid fingers, it doesn't make sense. And it's just a privilege to be with you guys today. And we're going to get started. So as we get started, there's a lot of different visuals. I'm going to be showing you some quotes. And I hope that you enjoy the presentation. And more than anything else, I hope that you walk away thinking differently. So why don't we get started?
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. Now the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
So this advertisement was created back in 1984 by Apple, and it was a young guy by the name of Steve Jobs. I don't know if you guys are familiar with who he is, and he wanted to break into this industry. And what he thought was, in order to break into this industry, I have to break out of the box that they have created. I have to think differently. I have to pose ideas to the world that very few people consider. like myself. And this was the ad campaign. As you know now, raise your hand if you have an iPhone, iPad, iWatch. Right, so he's helped the entire world to think differently. And before we start to talk about that, it's important that you know my story. Because before I start to lecture you or talk to you about thinking different, I want you to see where I came from. So as Mr. Moss said, I'm from Brownsville, Brooklyn. Anybody familiar with that area? Yeah, don't go if you don't know anyone. If you know somebody, go. If you don't know anybody, and you hear that the house party you're trying to attend is in Brownsville, you might not want to go. Well, no, it's not like that anymore. It's changed a lot. But I grew up in Brownsville. Here are my parents. Come from a Panamanian household. And if you notice, the picture that's being taken is taken in prison. Because my dad was in prison for 13 years. I didn't grow up with a father. I grew up with my mom. And if you look closely at his hand, his finger was actually cut off. Because that's the kind of life that he was living. So my relationship with my father was that of seeing him when I went to visit him in prison. That was life with Dad. And my mom, she raised myself and my other two brothers in a, a 2-bedroom apartment. And this is the housing projects that I'm from. Riverdale houses. Riverdale houses, if you ever Google it, is one of the most notorious housing projects in Brownsville back in the 80s and 90s. And that's our courtyard. And I won't go into too much detail, but a lot of very, bad things happen on that courtyard. I can point to different sites where I lost friends in front of me. And that was my life. Here's my friends that I grew up with. Now, the guys that you see in the picture, some are no longer alive, some are in prison. And, these are my childhood friends. So at the age of 13 and 14 years old, I was exposed to things that no child should ever see. Every day. So what happens is when you're in that type of environment, you start to adapt to those behaviors, to that mindset. You get socialized. You start to think that living in this way is normal. Being violent is normal. And the way that Brownsville is set up is kind of like an island to itself. So we didn't get a lot of exposure to different places because, going downtown Brooklyn, if you lived in Brownsville, was a big deal. So that's the world that I lived in. Now don't laugh. The guy in the brown jacket with that weird looking hat, that's me. Several pounds lighter, of course. Still handsome, I would say. But that's me. And if you look closely at my face, I was really confused at this point. I was in junior high school, and I had assimilated to what was going on in my environment. I changed my name, I joined a gang, but I wasn't happy. It didn't fulfill me at my core, because that type of life it's not for human beings. And I was really confused. The funny thing is that those guys in that picture that are with me, they actually became police officers. And life is funny in that way. And this is a list of all of my friends that died or are in prison. And I could explain every single violent thing that happened to them, which would take too much time. But that was my childhood. That was my life. Some people will feel ashamed to talk about these things, but I feel a sense of pride, a sense of accomplishment, because I was able to grow up in this environment and be successful. But what happened was I had to think differently about what it meant to be a person living in that environment and what it meant to survive in that environment. And in order to think differently, you need mentors. So what happened was I started to build relationships with older men that were trying to do something positive in their lives. And these are some of the guys. One of my friends is Maurice Cozart. Still very close to him. I had gone out to visit a church and he became like my counselor. And the way that I dressed and I spoke, I felt so out of place. I don't know if you ever felt that way in the classroom. You kind of feel like you don't belong, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough. And he was like one of the first people to tell me, like, hey dude, none of that matters. We need people like you in this environment. Be yourself. Just be great at who you are. This is another friend of mine, Senator Campbell. He was like a star athlete dude. scholarship, all of the new clothing and everything else, but secretly he was a geek. He studied, he did all of his work, but he was ashamed of his intellect, and I don't know if you can relate to that also. Being really, really smart and wanting to participate in conversations, but not wanting to seem like a know-it-all. Raise your hand if you can relate to being that person. Yeah, so that was him. Another mentor of mine, Andre Rozier. He taught me how to box, taught me self-defense. That was a great experience. And this is another friend of mine. He had a different experience. We were best friends. He went down a different road, but he's still like a brother to me. And I still spend time with him all. I just spoke to him before I started speaking to you guys. And here's another mentor of mine. This guy, he's 6'5", German, and he gave me the discipline that I needed. He wasn't trying to be my best friend at all. He told me that I needed to stop making excuses because of where I come from and to not use that as a crutch and to be the very best scholar that I could be. But these different people helped me to think differently. And it was conversations like this. Now, the video that I'm going to show you, that is some foul language, but I want you to get the point of it. In order for you to think differently, you need people to mentor you, to speak life into you, to change your mind about a few things. Just to give you a little background into this video, what had happened was Robin Williams was working with a young man for a very, very long time. Anybody else saw Good Will Hunting? Oh gosh, this thing makes me cry like every time. So Robin Williams was working with this guy. He had a lot of problems. He was a young guy, 19, 20, 21 years old. He had a lot of emotional abuse that had happened to him, verbal abuse, physical abuse, and he never wanted to talk about it. But he was such a talented scholar. He would go to different Ivy League schools and he would, write out these huge math equations and solve them and hide his intelligence. And at this point, they were having a counseling session, and Robin Williams finally had a breakthrough. And I want you to see what happened.
Your father, I'm back to the judge for evaluation. You're not going to fail me, are you? What's it say? Read it. Why? Have you had any experience with that?
20 years of counseling.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty good shit. Have you had any experience with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I have. Sure ain't good.
My father was an alcoholic. Mean fucking drunk. Come home hammered, looking to wail on somebody. So I had to provoke him so he wouldn't go after my mother and little brother. Interesting nights were when he wore his rings.
He used to just put a wrench's stick and a belt on the table and just say choose.
I gotta go with the belt there, then.
And I just go with the wrench.
Why the wrench?
Fuck him. That's why.
Your foster father.
So, what is it, like, Will has an attachment disorder and all that stuff? Fear of abandonment? Is that why I broke up with Scott?
I didn't know you had it.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
No.
Mm-hmm. I don't know about. You see this? All this shit. It's not your fault. Look at me now. It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
I know.
No. It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
Right.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault. fuck with me, all right? Don't fuck with me, Shawn. Not you. It's my fault.
Yeah, so this was the most powerful scene to me. And the reason it was so powerful is because you can see that throughout his life, he believed that the abuse, the physical abuse that he had suffered or he had seen going on in his household, he blamed it on himself all this time. And that's what he thought. That was his thinking. And Robert Williams stepped in and said, hey, I need to change the way you think about that. You need to let that burden go. And we all need people like that to help us think differently. See, the thing about school is that nowadays it's really not even about the academics. There's things going on in your lives that you want to talk to people about. You want to be open about. And it makes it difficult for you to just focus on academics. Even if there's not things going on at home, there's things going on inside of you, emotionally, psychologically. And you need somebody to help you think differently. You see, he could not have gotten to this point if he didn't have someone else talking with him, guiding him through his emotions. Right? So in order to think differently, you need support. You need a mentor. You need a teacher. You need a guidance counselor to help you think differently. There's a couple of people that chose to think differently that I look up to. You guys know who he is. XXXTentacion. And you know, when he first came out, no one really liked this kid. They didn't like his music. I think Drake stole a song from him, if I'm correct. And, you know, recently he lost his life. And there was so many different tributes to him and memorials and people marching in the streets. And I always wondered, like, why were so many young people fascinated with this guy? And the reason is because he helped them to think differently about who they were. Being honest and open about their mindset, their feelings, their emotions, and their thoughts. Another person that I think is amazing, you guys know who he is. Who is he? Logic. And what's so powerful about that phone number that's in backup? It's a suicidal hotline that he turned into a song that became a #1 song across the country, and people use to avoid going into really dark places. He chose to think differently about the platform that he had. He wanted to use his music to make a difference. You might not know this young man, but he created a generator back home in Africa so his entire country or village could have power. There's another gentleman here who was offered scholarships to all Ivy League schools. He chose to think differently. I don't know if you guys participated in the student walkout against gun violence. My students did in front of me, and they laughed in my face as they did it. But you know, a lot of the changes that we talk about in terms of a growth mindset or changing your thinking is already happening, and you guys have that ability. You have that power. You need to be proud of it. And this is not just now, but it's been a history of people who chose to think differently about who they were. Anybody know who this young man is? W.E.B. Du Bois. You should get to know him. You should get to know him. He's an excellent man, and he thought that slaves should not go to schools just for agriculture, but they should be intellectuals. And they should learn about how to think about science and math and different things like that. Booker T. Washington was his counterpart. He thought something different. He felt like, you know, probably they need to just work hard and be in schools, and he went back and forth. Anyone know who this is? Nicky Giovanni. Okay. Anybody know that guy? Raise your hand. Martin Luther King. All right. Maya Angelou. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Anybody read that one? Okay. Good. So this is a history of people who chose to think differently and made a huge impact on the world. And in order to think differently, you need someone who sees you in distress, who sees that your thought pattern is off, and is willing to step in and speak life to you. This is another video that was really powerful. The story that Dr. Martin Luther King was going to speak to present a eulogy at a funeral. And his heart was really heavy, and he felt really uncomfortable about what he was going to say. And he had someone who helped him think differently. And I want you to see the exchange and how it changed his presentation. Dr. Martin Luther King himself, this really powerful man, great public speaker, was going to present. And Mahalia Jackson, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mahalia Jackson, but she was his ancestor. And what that means is that any time that he was down or he felt discouraged, she would call and sing to him to stir up his spirit and to get him refocused. And here he needed that. He needed that encouragement to think differently. And what I want to tell you guys is that as you look in this room, across this crowd, these are people that you're just getting to know. But the point of this program is for you to build relationships with the people here that's going to help transform your mindset about academics, about being excellent as a scholar, about why it's important not to just get by in school, but to surpass expectations along the way. And you don't have to change your identity. You don't have to be like the person next to you. You can be who you are. The point is to change your mindset about academics. It's not a burden to read and to write and to do research. It shouldn't be something that you do just because your teacher tells you to. It should be something that you feel passionate about because you want to contribute to the world. Practicals. How do we practically change the way that we think? One, and this is a beautiful quote, it says, you can't really know where you are going until you know where you have been. That's from Maya Angelou. I think it's really important that you understand where you come from. Everyone here represents several different nations, colors, and creeds. You should do a little bit of research on all of the challenges that your people have faced to give you the opportunity to be where you are right now. If you do that just for a little bit, it will change the way that you see academics, 100%. Next is connecting. Anybody saw Black Panther? That was one of my favorite movies. Ladies, Michael B. Jordan, that's the one? Yeah? That's the one. Killmonger? All right. I know. My wife tells me all the time. If she gets too close to him, that's it for our marriage. But this quote that he said in Black Panther was amazing. He said, "Bury me in the ocean with my ancestors that jumped from ships because they knew death was better than bondage." His connection to his ancestors motivated him to do what he wanted to do. Now, he wasn't the best character in the movie. I know, he was kind of evil. But I think it's important that you not only know where you come from, but you connect to it, that you feel proud of it. So many times when you come from different places, if you have a different religion or different preference in any way, that's not the status quo, you feel ashamed of who you are. I know for me, growing up in the projects and telling people that I went to a study group while I'm in college and getting laughed at, that didn't feel too good. I wanted to just fit in. I didn't want to be singled out in that way. But I eventually started to build community with other people that were trying to do the same thing. The other thing is this: education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the entire world. Nelson Mandela. Now, when I think about education, I don't think about it in terms of what you have to learn in order to graduate from high school. That's part of it. But education is you going out and doing research on the things that's interesting to you. What you like. Not just, what's being told to you, but the things that you really like and enjoy. And the last one, this is a quote from the Bible. It says, "Become wise by walking with the wise. Hang out with fools and watch your life fall to pieces." You need to start looking at people in the room that are doing great academically, that are excellent scholars, and instead of from a distance mocking or jokingly saying, they know everything, you need to build a friendship with them. That's what worked with me. I built friendships with people like Jeffrey, because Jeffrey was going to get good grades no matter what he did in school. So I said, I'm going to sit next to you, not to cheat, guys, not to cheat, but to imitate his excellence in the classroom. I'm much older than him. We didn't go to school together. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you guys. And what I wanted to do is end it off with like a Q&A where we have a conversation. And honestly, guys, you have everything that you need. This is an excellent school.